Hello everyone, myself Shuri Mandal, Head of the Public Relations Cell of IIT Kharagpur. I'll be presenting before you the second webinar of the Institute webinar series, an initiative of the Public Relations Cell to bridge the gap of sharing of knowledge and experience between the alumni, dignitaries, and the student community. The speaker of today's webinar is Mrs. Anu Acharya, CEO of Ocimum Biosolutions, and young global leader at the World Economic Forum 2011. Mrs. Acharya obtained her Bachelor of Science in Physics from IIT Kharagpur in the year 1995. She was selected a Red Herring magazine to a list of 25 tech titans under the age of 35 in the year 2006. She has been named Biospectrum Entrepreneur of the Year in 2008 and also has been awarded the Astia Life Science Innovator Award in the same year. Mrs. Acharya has been past president of the Hyderabad chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization, a TEDx speaker at Gachibowli, Hyderabad, and currently serves as a board of ABLE, CSIR, and TIE Hyderabad. Mrs. Acharya will be delivering a session on inspiring women entrepreneurship and leadership at IIT Kharagpur. Over to Mrs. Acharya.
Thanks, Shubhri. I hope you can hear me okay?
Yes, we are perfect.
Okay. So after I've got my massive microphone, I feel very much in command. What I'm going to do today is going to maybe spend about 10 to 15 minutes talking a little bit in terms of just my journey and my story, hoping that will provoke some questions in all of you who are there. And therefore, I can then, based on the questions, I can then steer the conversation to that direction. Luckily for me, I think the environment that I was brought up in was fairly conducive. I grew up in the Kharagpur campus, and even though my dad is an academic, I think he very much had entrepreneurial genes in him and constantly experimented on various different things, starting with us as guinea pigs. The idea of being able to create something new was what started off at home, and many times it was not about just being able to create an idea, but it was about saying, how do you actually be able to take that idea that you've started with and be able to actually monetize it in some form or the other. So in that quest, I think I started off many times looking at various different objects or some things that I could sort of make into something that could be sellable. So in that quest, I think I've sort of made a lot of people who my parents knew as guinea pigs and was able to sell a variety of different little objects of what I thought was art at that time. But clearly it wasn't. Something that all of us should probably have that going for us. The first year, I think I spent most of my time trying to be able to do many other things other than being able to look at what was going on in terms of the academics. So it was suddenly in the middle of when mid-sem ended, because it sort of helps you in being able to create. But in being able to do that, I think one of the things that I realized was that there was, if I wanted to do something, it shouldn't be something that was mediocre. It should be something that is sort of geared towards what my personality was. And over the years, I think I decided that being able to pursue something that was more in line with who I am and who I was as a person was very important for me. And as a result, I decided that maybe just maybe at that time, that an MBA was the right thing for me to do. Luckily, I changed my opinion about that. And I did go to the US with a degree in physics. Very clear that I was going to move over from physics to something else. And I did that. I did that very quickly within a year or so. Right after that, I think I joined a startup. And I think that was probably the best thing that helped shape who I was as a person. That 1.5 to 2 years of my life after my master's was probably the most formative years in my life, because it helped me really understand what it meant to be an entrepreneur, because you're understanding that there can be very limited resources and you are able to create something that even big companies like the Bell Labs or AT&T or anybody else could use. So I think I learned many of my lessons in the startup that I was in, and I give a lot of credit to the two entrepreneurs that were at that time created that company and then sold it uh, 2 times after that. Interestingly for me, I think the customer that I was working for was a single man company, and we really helped him build an entire thing from scratch. And this was pre Facebook days, and what we were trying to build was very much something that was like Facebook for entrepreneurs, being able to build a social network around entrepreneurship and various other things. So in many ways, that sort of helped me understand what it meant to be able to create and take an idea from completely nothing, because it was a one-person company. There was nothing built at that time, to being able to build to a point where we could actually deliver something that people could log in and be able to create something, be able to create a very smart matching algorithm and so on. So these were the formative years, I think. But by the time we were doing all of this, there were many different ideas that came through. And along with me through my entire journey was also my classmate and my husband, Subhash. And both of us constantly looked at many other ideas that we could potentially do to be able to create something from scratch. And through this journey came many different ideas. Some of them are noteworthy, some of them were completely not worth mentioning. But there were some that were done with some other friends, and then there were others that just the two of us pursued. So there was one where we combined text, voice, data, everything. It was called voicegram.com. There was another company that we sort of went through a certain distance with other friends called Bandwidth Bazaar. And similarly, I think there were many different companies and many different ideas and many different concepts with many different partners that we thought about and tried. One of the biggest lessons that I learned over doing all of that was it was not the lack of ideas that we could come up with. It was very easy for us to be able to get 3 people or 2 people in a room or even a single person and come up with many different ideas, be able to understand it from many different problems or many different perspectives. And the biggest challenge was not about ideas, but it was about being able to actually put in your heart and put in your passion into work and being able to execute what all of that means. So I think those were like the starting points of where we could take a step towards being able to completely dive into entrepreneurship. And in 1999, early 2000 was when we decided that this was definitely the direction we were going, and we were going to go into this with leaving our jobs that were well-paying and well protected in the US, and be able to come back and be able to create something that was more impactful, more meaningful in our lives. And I think that was where we met up with Sujata, who's a genomics person, and the idea or the Ocimum was really born out of a basement in Indianapolis. And it was interesting because we had thought about, this was one of the few ideas that had come across through our mind in the past, and we realized that it was not something that was easily executable because it didn't seem like it had a lot of traction going on at that time. And I think this is, these were the days prior to when the human genome was sequenced. It was the days where it was still fairly a very new science. So that was where Ocimum was started. We came back to India in November of 2000, and during that journey was also a little baby that we had. We had a 10-month-old baby that we had along with it. So we basically had 2 little babies that we had to take care of at the same time. One was Ocimum and one was Neha. And coming back to India, we decided that this was, an exciting field, but we also realized there was complete lack of any human resources available at all at that time. And while it was difficult in the US and India, it was almost next to impossible. So we were left. One, I think our only domain expert was in the US. Both of us had come back with clearly no background in biotech except till our 12th grades. And here we were trying to fix something that was, a new science, a new, completely new place to start working all over again. And but we were determined. I think at that time the whole passion of being able to create something was so strong that we overlooked everything that was in front of us to be able to then create something that we could create that of value. And so in 2000, 2001, we decided that we created a core team of people. We found one or two people who were, could understand something, but we realized that the way we could build this thing was to be able to get people from outside of India to be able to create a team that was a core team. And I think I'm happy to say that many of the people that we recruited at that time are still with us and have been what has been the reason behind why Ocimum has been where it is. Because it's always important, the first few people that you have on board, if they're the right people, I think you have a lot of the right things going for you. But these are early days. You can imagine that it was something that there was a business plan, there was something, but the industry was changing so rapidly. The assumptions that we made were not necessarily correct. So we had to make a lot of changes. And I think to this day, I think one of the reasons why we've survived and why we've done relatively, been able to create one of the biggest companies in the genomic space has primarily been our reason to be able to adapt to changes that have happened in the environment around us. And as a result, I think while the initial part of the business was to be able to have a much more US-facing company with a backend in India, I think we ended up being a much more of a Indian company, even though the front end was the US. I think a lot of the work, a lot of the programming, a lot of the products were being created in India. And so over the period of the next 4 or 5 years, one of the things we started to do was to be able to create a roadmap of products that we could create. And we created products for lab information management, because I understood that process as well in terms of just information management. Then there were also products that we created in the sequence analysis space, in the microanalysis space, and then once we had it, then we started, we kept going on in the entire bioinformatics space. And once you have a team and the team can deliver, it is much more easier to be able to create that timeline of that path for us. So that's sort of where we went, and along the way, along in 2005, I think was a very interesting part of what happened to the company. Because while we were well known as a bioinformatics company, a company that could create products, our revenue scale was very, very small. And at that time, we found a customer that was going to be very significant for us. Interestingly enough, I think the customer ended up becoming, a company or a portion of the company that we ended up buying. And similarly, I think we, for the first 5, 6 years, while we had survived on bootstrapping, on being able to use our own money to be able to create this venture, finally in 2006, we gave in to the VCs and the PE groups. And so we raised 2 rounds of funding after that in 2006 and 7. Even to this day, I'm not sure if that was the smartest thing to do, but we did what was needed to do. And doing that, we had also done 3 acquisitions by that time. We had acquired companies in Germany, in the Netherlands, and in the US. And we then became one of the largest companies in the genomic space, which had a very unique business model, which was combining both software, data, as well as services, both out of the US, Europe, and in India. And that was sort of the model we wanted to create. Over the years, we sort of looked at our vision and be able to create something that was what was initially thought, which was enabling R&D, towards being something that was much more clearly defined, which was saying, how do we perform research as a service over the cloud to be able to allow customers to be able to do what they wanted to do on a cloud environment. So that's sort of the direction that we were heading. In 2010 and 11, in 2011, we ran into some very, very difficult times for the company. We had to eventually last year close down the US division, which was one of our biggest divisions. But at the same time, I think that was also a time of a lot of thought in terms of what we wanted to be and whether that was something that was scalable. We had crossed 100 crores by the time, but we knew that it wouldn't be able to grow further too much more in that direction if we were going to be focused on the research markets. So around 2010, 11, and maybe early of early part of 12, we were constantly thinking about being able to do something in the consumer space, being able to utilize what is there in the genomics world to be able to do something both in the consumer side, but also something that is much more closer to the clinical side. And so most of 2012, my co-founder left the company and started working on Map My Genome, which he continued to do until early of this year. And that's the company that is now doing direct to consumer services, where we are doing genetic profiling. Early January of this year, I decided that that was something that was fascinated by, and that was something that needed a lot of some branding and marketing and many other things that I would probably be much more. I would enjoy much more. So in January of this year, I decided that that was something that I wanted to do on a much more long term than I was doing. So right now I'm in the middle of two companies, and it's extremely exciting. It's like having double the energy that was there maybe a year ago. So I hope that gave a little bit of understanding of what we've done so far, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have at this time.
Right. So we have a couple of questions. One is, how do you select the correct people to start your own startup? So people actually fear to select the correct people to share the ideas with. So how do you choose your co-founders or your members of your startup?
So if you're talking about my co-founders or my partners, I think that was easier. One was my husband, but have someone that you can trust and someone who complements what you can bring to the table. So I think when you look at it, our team, which was a 3-member team, one had the science background. So Sujata had all the science background. She was a genomic scientist for the last 20 years. So she brought in all the domain expertise onto the table. Subhash had, even though he was at IIT Kharagpur, ended up doing a lot of finance. So he brought in a lot of the financial piece to the company. And my job in the beginning was twofold. I think one was to be able to understand, the information management process, so the MIS, the processes, be able to create the right kind of processes, but also to be able to see how you can actually sell it or brand it and so on. So those are my main functions in the beginning. And I think as we continue to grow, we sort of created the rest of the second layer of the team around us. So if you're talking about the second, the core team that we created after the co-founders, I think we went through a very, very rigorous interview process, almost, I think, about 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. And even though we are a completely unknown company, I think because of the rigor in the process itself, I think we have managed to be able to get the right kind of people that we wanted. And we only took about 4 or 5 people in the beginning. And slowly we added on more people, and they came either through a referral or someone who had worked in the US, someone who had worked, or one who had worked for Sujata in her lab in the US. We found someone else who worked in Japan and came back again through somebody that we knew. So we used a lot of the network that we knew, people that you could trust, and be able to then get people that you wanted to be able to get, whether they were local in Hyderabad or whether they were somebody that you could get from outside. And I think that was very important for us to be able to create that team, because you were not going to be able to find the right sort of people living within Hyderabad. And the other thing I think we also found over the years was to be able to find the right kind of people who are willing to be able to work in an environment like this, because the startup is not necessarily a very stable in terms of both the timings as well as the financial compensation that you might get in a startup. So I think it's important to be able to find the right kind of people who understand what it means to be in a startup. So the learning is much, much higher, but you also have to realize that if those people don't understand what it means to be in a startup, they might not necessarily do well, however good they might be in their respective fields. So I think those are the key things to understand when you're recruiting your core team in the beginning.
Okay, thank you. So next question is, from IIT Kharagpur, every year we find several innovative startups that come up in the last decade. But most of them, startups are basically boys-centric. So most of them are started by, mainly by boys of IIT Kharagpur. So we hardly find any girls coming up with startup initiatives, building up a team, and then taking it forward. So what can be the reason for this, and how the girls can take up initiative in building up their own startups?
So I think one, you're being a little unfair because the ratios of women to men is very very skewed even from the beginning, right? I mean, I think in our time we were at like 10 girls in 400, and I think the ratio hasn't improved vastly from there. So you already start off with very very small numbers. But beyond that, I think it's also about being able to have enough people that you can reach out to in case you need help. And so you need the mentoring, you need the right kind of support, because at the end of the day, when you're doing business, people do business with people that they are comfortable with. And I think that has been the biggest challenge in having a lot more people that lot more women being in the in a field like entrepreneurship, because it requires a lot of there's a lot of time and dedication, and there clearly aren't enough women in the tech field, as we're starting to discover that there aren't enough even across the world. So it becomes difficult to look up to people as potential as role models, as someone whose story is out there. But that's changing. I think that's changing over the years. I think in the 12 years that I've been an entrepreneur, I feel I've aged, but I've also seen a lot of many new companies, new started. I think from our time to today, I think I've seen a lot more women taking on this field. Whether it is in a big way or a small way or any way that they feel comfortable with. I think that is happening. And I think it will continue to happen because there is a lot of joy in being able to run your own business. While at the same time, I think there is also a lot of time and a lot of commitment that is needed to be able to be to be an entrepreneur. So I think the numbers will certainly change, and they'll change by one is having a much more influx of women to start off with, and the second is I think over the years we've started to see more startups coming up across the world in the tech area, and I think that will sort of you know once you have enough number of people, I think you'll see you will start to see many more people do that. And I think that has happened even for men. I mean, I don't think there were that many entrepreneurs from Kharagpur in the past, right? I mean, there were few, there were not that many. And now you see a lot more. And I think it's because people have seen many other people do it and realize that it's not going to be something that will make them fall off the cliff, because once you have a degree from IIT, you pretty much can, even if you fail, you can go back and probably do something that will make sure that you have a decent living. So I think that realization that it is most people fear about not being able to get back, I think that is going away. And I think once that goes away, it becomes easier to be able to do something that is as risky as being able to start your own company. So I'm hopeful. I think we'll see a lot more, and I've already interacted with a few people that I feel are have shown interest in becoming entrepreneurs already. I don't think I was that clear in terms of what an entrepreneur meant when I was in third year or fourth year, even though I knew that I wanted to be running something on my own. So I think those things are sort of changing a little bit, and I'm pretty hopeful that that will change over the next 5 to 10 years. By the time my daughters will be, you know, going to college, I think things will be a little bit different.
Right. Uh, what do you think will be the right kind of steps to be taken, by the administration to actually encourage girls to work in teams and come up with initiatives?
I think it's the starting numbers, right? I mean, there's a lot of comfort in terms of one is if there's enough mentorship that was there for students to be able to see what it means. It's not really rocket science. I mean, it's about persistence. It's about being able to put in effort where it's necessary. I think it's about being able to see that cycle go through. That will give a lot of comfort. But the most important thing I think is that we're just seeing very less number of people even get into to start off with, right? So I think that is the biggest challenge that we have. That the ratios are still so skewed that you will not be able to encourage that many people as it is to start off with. The second thing I think is that there should be some sort of a linkage because of the numbers are so less, to be able to link up with alumni, to be link up with other people that will allow them to sort of have that, to be able to use that network to be able to then grow that idea or the business into the next level. And I think that is a very important thing. And I think that's sort of happening now with the social media platforms that we have and with potential groups that are there. So it's important, I think, to for women, and for what I've found in my own experience has been that there are two ways that you can look at what makes you understand how to do business. Is one is that you have to have your own group of women friends as well as mentors and role models that you need, because if there are problems that you need to talk to, that is one thing. The second thing is, of course, that you have to do the same things that everybody else does. Whether it is networking, whether it's being able to travel, whether it's other things. If you want to see the same results, I think you also have to do the same things, same amount of information or the same amount of rigor that is necessary. So once you need to make sure that you are always on the same level playing field. So I think it's important to understand what it takes, both from women who have done this otherwise, and also from men who have done this, right? I think we are never really exposed to entrepreneurship, at least when we were, growing up at that time. But I'm glad that is changing. And I think once it changes, you realize that if someone else had done it, I can do it too. And I think that feeling is necessary. So once someone knows that, and once someone is comfortable with that idea that it's doable and that it's okay to not succeed, because most of the time people have to do it 2 or 3 times to be able to get it right, then I think it's a fine thing to do, and it gives a lot more control. It gives a lot of satisfaction. So whatever energy it takes away from you, I think it also brings it back when you're working on that idea. So from I think you're doing the right things right now, but I think ultimately it has to be about being able to get the confidence level to a point where everybody, the women are feel that it is okay or it's the right decision, and not a waste of their time to be able to spend 10 years of their lives trying to build something from scratch.
Okay. I got one more question. It says, stress management has always been an issue with girls, and one of the main reasons why they don't take up risky challenges. How do you think one can overpower this?
I think, like I've always found, and I think maybe it's just how I am built as a person genetically, but I've always, regardless of the amount of stress that I'm going through, I always find that I can keep myself happy by just finding little things to enjoy along the way, right? And I think, by being, by finding happiness in those little things, I'm not really looking for the ultimate happiness in achieving something. And I think that for me has been what has helped me tackle through a lot of the stress that is there. The second thing, I think what I've always found is that most people end up wanting to do every single thing, and there are many things that I'm not good at, and I know that I'm not good at. For instance, they can be cleaning of my clothes or desk or something else. I'm very happy to give it out to someone else, right? but I think it's like there are certain things that you have to understand, that you all have the same amount of time, and if you want to maximize, you want to optimize your life, then there will be things that you should not be bothered about doing. If you can delegate, if you can avoid, but do the right things that make you happy. You have some time for yourself, have friends, because it's very important for stress management to have enough number of friends that also go through similar stressful lives, to sort of understand how to get over that. And I think most importantly, I think it is being able to maybe over the last few months, I found a new way of being able to have a slightly lesser stressful life, I think, and that has been by finding time to actually to work out and find those which I never found in many years. But I'm actually being able to find the half an hour or 40 minutes to be able to actually do a workout run for 20 minutes and so on. So I think it's important to be able to find the things that make you happy. It's important to say that you understand that your job is going to be stressful, that you're going to have days when things are going to be so bad that you will not, under normal circumstances, you'll not be able to, most people might mean uh, a complete death situation. But I think as an entrepreneur, those are expected. And if you enjoy that, it's even better. But if you don't, then I think you realize that when you are in that down position, that there's always upwards to look at. But for me personally, it has always been about enjoying the even if I spend 20 minutes with my daughter, finding time to enjoy that, listening to a song, reading a book, doing normal things in the middle, finding, make sure that you do all the right things that are there when you're on a plane, sleep. So things like that, I think, you learn how to optimize your life, learn how to enjoy life in different little things, and learn how not to do everything that everybody around you is doing. And I think that's the way that you can optimize that. At the end of the day, whatever variables you take into it, that your total number of hours are still going to be constant like everybody else. And the other thing that I've done is, which I would not recommend anyone to do, is to sleep for 4 to 5 hours a day, and that gives you a lot more time to do other things. But I mean, that's there. So there are many different ways that different people manage stress. For some, it comes naturally, and I think for me, I'm just happy that I'm one of those. But for many others, I think there's a very clear methods in terms of how you could potentially do that, based on how you react to many different things.
Okay. Another question. One of the important aspects of starting own company is to have a good mentorship from someone. So, what are the options a normal student has at IIT Kharagpur to start their own ventures? Maybe a girl or a boy. So, what are the options?
I mean, when I think about it, I really didn't have mentors that were strictly entrepreneurs when I started. Um, I think there were many people who were around me that sort of encouraged anything that I thought was good to do. For instance, I think, you know, um, my dad has been a big source of what I do, but I think he ever mentored me in the traditional way of being an entrepreneur. Clearly, I think my husband's family is a business-oriented family, but I don't think in the term of how mentorship and other things have arrived, I don't think necessarily had that. So I don't think it is an absolute necessity to have it when you start off. But as I've gone along the path, I think I have found mentors, and I continue to find mentors even today or otherwise. And I think some of them have come in unusual, I mean, in ways that I wouldn't have expected. I mean, one of my biggest mentor, for instance, is one of my board members, and she has been an absolutely wonderful mentor. But I got to know her only after running Ocimum for about 6 years. So I don't think I necessarily have had um, um, you know, necessary to have specific mentors, although it might be a good thing to do that. But at the same time, I think I've always had people to bounce off ideas. So I think that was the important thing for me, that there were there were ways to be able to find that. And I think one of the ways that I did that was by joining professional organizations like Entrepreneurs Organization, which I've been part of for the last 12 years. And I think that was extraordinarily helpful in being able to give me a network of people that were going through very similar problems, that were also you know, struggling, but there were also people that you could also go in and be friends with. And I think when when you've passed the age of being in college or past the age of being in school, I think that is very, very important. So I think for me, the mentorship came from the group of people that were part of what we call as a forum, where you sit and discuss and come up with a problem that can be confidential, and discuss and share your experiences. And I think that for me was incredibly helpful, because it helps you to formulate your own thoughts, formulate your own responses, and your own way of being able to tackle with specific challenges. I think similarly, I think over the years, whether it was the TIE organization or ABLE, which is another professional organization, I think those have been very, very helpful in terms of being able to understand and help me in terms of just total development. So I think EO was probably the closest that I could get to in terms of what was close enough to be mentors that were of my age, that were going through similar problems, and that could, many of them were also women and have become some of my best friends. So I think it really helps in being able to be part of something that will, the sort of people that are going through similar problems helps. But it was not necessarily something that I had formulated as being my mentors. I think it might be a smart thing to do that now that you have the option of being able to, have someone that can talk to you on a regular basis and be able to help you through some of the challenges that you're going through. And then there are friends of mine who have also resorted to means like being able to talk to a professional coach, which who helps you to be able to understand and deal with the challenges that you deal with on a regular basis. So I hope that sort of answers some of the question that you had on mentorship.
True. They are awesome. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Acharya, for delivering such a wonderful session. We are extremely happy to have you as the second speaker of our Institute webinar series. I'm sure many of our students have learned from your experiences. The video of this webinar will be uploaded on the official YouTube channel of IIT Kharagpur. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Acharya, once again. Have a good evening.